And hello, everybody. Welcome along. It is another edition, the first of 2024 for the Cricket Badger podcast, and special mention to the Gaurav Ayaan YouTube channel as well. Lucas, a part of that, and Lucas, our resident Aussie, is back with me for the start of 2024. First and foremost, everybody, before we get into the issue of today, Happy New Year to all the Cricket Badgers, to all the Gaurav Ayaan's followers, and to you, Lucas, as well. Happy New Year, mate.
Yes, Happy New Year to all the viewers, and to you, James. I'll be respectful. Hope for a Happy New Year for you personally, but that's as far as I'll go when it comes to any English people. So but I wish you well, James.
May all your test defeats in 2024 be painless, Lucas. That's what I would say to you in response to that. But today, we're going to look at this issue. Is Test cricket dying? If so, how can it be revived? What does cricket have to do, basically, to keep Test cricket at the forefront of the game? Has cricket got its priorities wrong? And this chat stems from a couple of things that have happened in the last week or so. Firstly, South Africa have named a touring party for the Test series against New Zealand, which is very much a B team because it coincides with their new South African T20 tournament. Obviously, a lot of money will be generated by that tournament. So they've got their A-listers, for want of a better phrase, committed to that. Can't tour New Zealand. And therefore, a lot of Test caps are going to potentially be given to people who weren't really going to be getting them at this part of their career. Who knows who might come from this? It might actually be the best thing that's ever happened to South African cricket. They might find some legends crop up out of the B team, but we'll find out that as we go through 2024. But it's left a lot of us thinking, surely this isn't the right way to tackle Test cricket, to kind of, Test cricket should be the pinnacle. We've seen Steve Waugh making a lot of comments saying, how can we say this is the true test of a player if they're not playing against the best opponents that can be? I do feel for New Zealand fans that have bought tickets for that series, who have bought tickets thinking they're going to see these South African top stars, and they're not going to be seeing those stars at all. And then you mentioned on our WhatsApp group this morning, Lucas, the Shaheen Shah Afridi and his decision to miss the last test against Australia because he is the T20 international captain. It's going to be his first series as a T20 captain, and he's decided to rest in the final test and wait for the T20s to arrive. A lot of this is understandable, Lucas, I would suggest, but it's also not great, is it?
Well, I understand why they're all doing it. T20 is a shorter game. It's less on the body. In today's modern game, injuries, you're more likely to get an injury than not. Playing back then, because of all the T20, because of all the ODIs. So I understand why players want to play the short format of the game. They bowl 4 overs. If you're a bowler, that's it. You're done. Good game. If you're a batter, you can just hit it from wherever you want. Good game. So I understand the perspective of it.
You can make a very good living as a batter, regularly hitting sort of 33 off 16 balls, can't you? Yeah. Which takes some doing. Exactly. Don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily grinding out a test innings over 2 days, is it?
No. Well, I think with all the cricket we've seen in the last 12 months, I think, and especially the Ashes series, it's kind of that was kind of a step forward, that series. It was one of the best series that I can remember. And then, with all this stuff, it's taken a step back. What I don't like personally is, why does Test cricket have to be the guinea pig of these other formats? Now, this is going to sound probably a bit, sarcastic and that, but when you grow up to be a cricketer in Australia, you're cherished to play one format, Test match cricket. That's your dream. You dream there to make 100 on a Boxing Day or 100 against England in the Ashes. You're not really there to belt some bowler around the park, as you said, 30 or 15 balls. You're there to play Test cricket. And I'm not having a go at other nations for this, but we've seen what happens to the West Indies. West Indies were an absolute powerhouse. all those years ago, and now their Test cricket is dead. And they've struggled to make World Cups because of T20. Sri Lanka was also a very good Test nation, and that's been ruled by T20. I just don't think other countries have prioritised Test cricket. I was very upset with South Africa because I thought South Africa, I knew they had trouble, but they would always put on a Test series, on their summer, always. And to come out and to play, as you mentioned, a B squad against New Zealand, I think that's extremely disrespectful. Now, having said that, I've got no problem if South Africa said, you know what, I want to send a B grade team to New Zealand. I want to rest our bowlers. I want to rest our batsmen. That's fine. I've got no problem with that. But once again, it's at the expense of T20. That's the huge problem I have with this. It's always Test cricket's guinea pig or experiment, when someone wants to do something with T20. And that's the worst thing about T20. It's killing Test cricket. And it's not just with the South African series. It's with Shaheen Afridi. I thought Shaheen Afridi in the second Test bowled extremely well. And then for him to pull out and say, you know what, it's work management, I think that's poor. I think that's just a very poor decision. You grow up to play Test cricket for the mental ability. It's the only format where it challenges you mentally, emotionally, physically. It's the only format. And to say, you know what, I don't really want to bowl all these overs. I want to have a rest, work management. I think that's mentally weak. And that pains me to say that because Shaheen Afridi is he's a world-class bowler. On his day, he is world-class in any format, especially Test matches. So, and again, like I said, it's at the expense of T20. And I think that's the worst thing about it, is that
for the betterment of T20, you mean?
Yeah.
Not at the expense of T20s, to actually better T20s. I agree with you to a large extent, but I do think in all of these situations there are more than one side to it, probably 5 sides to it. I think with the South African situation, from what I understand, I mean, Fidosi Munda, South African journalist, wrote a really good piece on the ESPN Cricket Info site. If you're watching Fidosi, Happy New Year. It's not just about it comes down to the cash, but it comes down to the fact that the South African Cricket Board need the cash to survive. So therefore, they've introduced a T20 tournament to try and get revenue. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I like watching. I mean, where we differ, I think, is I like watching T20 competitions around the world. You're not so keen. But whatever we think about T20, it's here to stay, and there will be franchise tournaments. South Africa are trying to get their piece of the pie because, as an international nation, they're not the richest cricket nation there is. So they're trying to wipe the feet and keep paying the bills. They have to do that. It's not, they've said to these players, it's not the players' fault because they've said to these players, you've got to play in this. We kind of own you because we pay your wages. So you're playing. What you're doing in this period of the calendar is playing in the South African T20, not going with the Test team. So they've kind of got no choice really from that respect. And I think apparently the South African Cricket Board tried more than once to reschedule the Test series against New Zealand, but couldn't find another window to do it because we said many times on this podcast, you've only got 365 days in a year. And there's so much going on. There's so much in the calendar that, just to try and rejig a Test series like that has proved impossible despite the efforts of the South African Cricket Board. So ultimately, hopefully as a one-off, they've just had to kind of like bite the lemon and suck it up. And this isn't ideal. What my take on this would be, rather than to criticise the South African Cricket Board and to criticise the players themselves, I think the South African Cricket Board would admit this isn't ideal. I think the players themselves would admit this isn't ideal. New Zealand certainly would think this isn't ideal because they've been selling tickets on the basis that this first 11's coming and it's not. What the game needs is leadership. What the game needs is the very top of the game to actually tackle this. I mean, we've been talking about this on the Cricket Badger podcast, the inequality around the world in terms of what the cricket boards get. The fact that there are the big 3, there's you in Australia, there's me in England, there's the guys watching in India who are now probably the most powerful country in the cricket world and the richest country in the cricket world, who are basically dictating to the rest of the cricket world what is right and what is wrong and what they should do and what they shouldn't do. There needs to be a more equitable split of the funding so that the South African Cricket Board is able to actually then pay its Test cricketers possibly a better price and to avoid this. But more than anything, the ICC, what are you actually there for? Are you just a glorified events business who host international tournaments and basically have the big seats in the hospitality boxes at the top of it and swan around? Or are you actually here to administer and guide this sport of ours into the future? Because if you are the latter, and I would suggest that should be your role, you should be foreseeing eventualities like this and guarding against them. We've been talking on the Cricket Badger podcast for years about how T20 franchises are a potential danger for Test cricket, how the calendar's only got 365 days in it, how money shouldn't be the be-all and end-all of sport. It's important, but it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. And we should be giving priority to Test cricket and priority to T20 and priority to ODIs, giving everybody their chance to shine, but doing it joined up. Where is the talking to each other in all of this process? Where is the we need somebody to actually say, this is dangerous. This is potentially Test cricket is going to be obliterated by this. If everybody who has got any talent goes off and plays T20 franchise leagues and Test cricket teams are basically, from an English perspective, kind of second 11 county teams almost, Test cricket is dead, isn't it?
And you hit the nail on the head with the ICC. They need to do more. I would. This is my suggestion. If a nation needs money, give it to them. They won't. But I have. If ICC came out and said, you know what, South Africa, here's 300 million. Fix your league, fix your problems. I just think that they'd try to fix T20. I don't think they'd work on Test cricket, and I think that's the problem with a lot of nations. If
I don't agree with you there. I think every cricket board is looking towards Test cricket as important. They are looking towards other things as being important too. So this route potentially of yours, Lucas, with all due respect, of just saying Test cricket is the only important thing, isn't the way to look at the future. Yeah, whether you like whether you like white ball or not, we've got to look at the global game as red and white ball. We've got to find a place for both, haven't we?
I have the people that follow me on social media and that, they think I have some kind of problem with T20 ODI. That's not the case. That was at the start with. That was never the case. I loved watching white ball cricket as much as red ball cricket, especially during the peak. I was a young boy, 6-year-old, watching the 1999 World Cup, when Australia famously beat South Africa in that semi-final. I was a young boy glued to my TV watching that series. And then I wouldn't go to school, when they played in the Caribbean in the next World Cup, because games are at 4 or 5 a.m. I refused to go to school. Probably that's why I haven't got a good education, James, but that's a different conversation. But I used to love white ball cricket. I used to watch it. But it's just in your face now. It's just too much of a, when the IPL came out, I used to be a Deccan Chargers fan who are no longer in the IPL at this point. I used to love watching Adam Gilchrist, Andrew Simon smack them around the park in the IPL, but it's now in your face, and it's now at the expense, I keep saying the expense of T20, but it's the expense of Test cricket, and that's what I really don't like. I don't like one format being sacrificed for another format, where Test cricket has always been the number one format. Before T20 came in, during even where World Series of Cricket was in the 70s, Test cricket was still the number one format.
Yeah.
And that's what I have a huge problem with. If players want to play IPL, that's fine. Got no problem with that. If they want to play South African League, if they want to play Big Bash, I've got no problem with that. But not at the expense of Test cricket. That's where I have the biggest problem with, James.
Some questions coming in, and you can post your questions on this live stream. Ashutosh Chaturvedi, apologies if I've absolutely butchered your name there, Ashutosh, but it all boils down to viewership, he says. follows that up with, I love Test cricket, but finding it difficult to watch for longer periods of time. I mean, the world is changing, Lucas, isn't it? Because when I was a lad, as going back into the black and white period,
Did they have TVs when you were born, James?
We had to wind them up, Lucas. We had to wind them up, and they were powered by the sun. But when I was a boy, there wasn't there wasn't loads of satellite channels for a start. There wasn't social media. I mean, when I was a kid, there wasn't the internet. We relied on teletext and CFAX to find out what the England team was going to be on a Sunday at a certain time. You'd be refreshing the page on the television to find out what the test squad was going to be. And the world's changed because now we've got, we're on YouTube now. You've got YouTube Shorts, you've got Twitter, you've got everybody's able to consume news and to keep up to date with events on their phones, on the train, and wherever they are. And they can do it in bite-sized ways. A T20, the 100, first time I've mentioned that in 2024, a T10 is much more geared towards the youth of today and their kind of short attention spans, I guess, without trying to be disrespectful. They like things to be quick, they like things to be easy, and they like things to be consumed fast food style, don't they? A test match, as Ashutosh was suggesting, is over 5 days. Me and you love it because it is, to me anyway, the pinnacle of the game. It's where you test yourself, the stamina, your technique's tested. And you are, if you succeed at test level, for me, you are the best cricketer around. But is a 18-year-old lad now who's going off to university, got his phone in his pocket, going to give 5 days to a test match?
I agree with that point 100%. But let's look at the Ashes series, the one that just gone. If you are an 18 or 17-year-old lad or whatever, and you can't take anything from that series, there must be something wrong with you. Surely you can take something from that series. Now, I know that's only one series, and not every test series is going to be like that. Just look at Pakistan and Australia.
You might be taking it without watching it for 5 days. You might be getting your half an hour highlights. You might be just getting the updates on your Twitter feed. I mean, the women obviously playing test cricket. There was the English women don't play anywhere near enough test cricket, in my view. And I think a lot of the English women players really want to play a little bit more because they understand that is a different challenge, or a really big challenge. And we have the Ashes, the women's Ashes, where there's one test and then a whole host of white ball games with points awarded for each one. I'd love to see at least 2 tests in that series. I'd like to see Zimbabwe, Bangladesh. We've brought in Ireland as a test playing nation. We brought in Afghanistan as a test playing nation. They've hardly played since they were brought into the fold because the big boys aren't playing them, are they?
And this is why I said to you on a previous podcast, I think then if they were to have a test license if the ICC were giving a test license to a new country, that would most likely be Netherlands. But I don't want Netherlands to get it anytime soon because the big boys are not going to play them. Just look at Ireland, look at Zimbabwe, look at Afghanistan. They hardly play any test matches, and if they do, it's a one-off series or a 2-test series. There should be. This is my belief, and I've said this on other shows as well, that if you're traveling to South Africa, it should be mandatory you're playing Zimbabwe. If you're traveling to India, it should be mandatory to play Afghanistan. That's where they play their test matches, in India. If you don't know, same with Ireland. When you tour England, it should be mandatory. And I think that's where the ICC should come down hard on that. That's where the ICC needs to get better in scheduling more test matches to these nations. Now that's all good. Look at Afghanistan in World Cups and white ball cups. Yeah, they do fantastically well. That's fantastic. That's great. No problem whatsoever. But at the end of the day, they do have a test license. We don't know how good these players are going to be in test matches because they never play. That's the most disappointing thing about it, James.
With Ireland, they had a terrific side. They kind of earn their test license by playing white ball cricket, basically, don't they? Because that's all they have to play. And Ireland had a really good white ball side for a long time, and then got the test license years after that, by the time they got to play Test cricket, a lot of those players had gone, and there seemed to be less coming through. And now they're not playing county cricket. The island setup isn't as strong as it used to be. So Ashutosh followed up with, but I am more interested in following Test than T20s. And I watched the highlights even after months and years. And then Bulldozer Williams, Bulldozer, he says, I think it's the fans. People's attention spans aren't there to handle Test cricket, which is basically what I was just saying there, Lucas.
Well, they don't want to watch 6 hours of cricket, and again, well, that's what it is: 2 hours each session, 90 overs in a game. Well, supposedly 90 overs in a game. Don't get me started on that. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But they can't. It's a taxing game to watch as well, James, on the TV, because like I said, you're there for 6 hours watching. Sometimes you can be watching absolutely nothing, or sometimes it could be one of the greatest series ever. It's a mixed bag. And I understand what you just brought up there, that people just might watch highlights of it. And they think, you know what, this might be good, or this is not as good as or exciting as T20 and that. And I think it's still the number one format. It's still the poster format of the ICC. If it's no longer the poster format of the ICC, then why are the ICC fighting it? Why are the ICC saying, oh, well, Test cricket's still number one, blah, blah, blah. Don't mention it. Change your opinion. Change the poster boy. That's also sending.
Don't encourage them to do that, Lucas. Don't encourage them to do that.
No, I don't want to encourage them to do that. But it sends mixed messages. Okay, you want to save Test cricket. That's why you brought in the Test World Championship. But how you executed that is completely wrong. In my opinion, I think it could have done a whole lot better.
I don't blame the players in this. Never have done. Because if I was a player, if I was a young lad coming through with loads of talent, the ability to play a long innings, but the ability to hit the ball a mile as well. So I appealed to all formats, cross-format player. Ultimately, it's your career. A Test 100 maybe doesn't pay the rent quite as much as a T20 100 in the IPL. So, what the game needs to do is have that balance. I mean, I've seen on Twitter a few suggestions, or X as we're supposed to call it these days, a few suggestions of could we have windows? The IPL's basically got a window already, hasn't it, of 2 months where very little else is played during that time. You can't really give a window to every single country. South Africa suddenly says, well, we need a month. The 100 suddenly says we need a month. By the time you get down the list of nations, there's 14 months been taken probably. But maybe there is a balancing act to say internationals take priority in XYZ month and DEF months, and then maybe white ball gets priority in the rest.
Well, it's a fine balance that the ICC have trying to fight for. Now, I understand what you just mentioned, windows, but then again, you'll have players saying, well, I don't want to play in that window because I've just came off an IPL stint, or I've came off a Big Bash stint. Now, again, I don't want to sound arrogant or sarcastic, or someone saying, oh, he's typical arrogant Aussie, but maybe I am sometimes, James. But Australia don't. Yeah. But Australia, I get it that South Africa, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, they can't afford to be as luxurious as Australia or India or England. But I can't imagine an Australian Test player like David Warner or Steve Smith saying, you know what, I'm not going to play Test cricket because I want to play IPL somewhere or another league somewhere. So I can't imagine any of those guys saying it.
Hasn't David Warner just said exactly that? Yeah.
That's thank you, David Warner. But he's right though. There would be no Australian player in the current test format. Now, obviously, you got other players playing domestically that play IPL, such and such. Adam Zampa doesn't have a test squad; he plays IPL and whatnot. Glenn Maxwell. Now, again, that's fine. That's I have no problem with that whatsoever. You can play IPL. Good luck, but not at the expense of Test cricket. And like I said, I can't imagine an Australian player ever doing that. If they did, I'm always strong on this. If you sacrifice Test cricket as an Australian player for IPL, because we pay our players extraordinary amount of dollars, just ridiculous amount of money. 3 years ago, we upped the wages, with the cricket when we switch TV networks and all that, blah blah blah. You know, my belief is if as an Australian Test match player, if you're in that system and you forfeit Test cricket to play IPL or Big Bash or whatever, you should never play cricket for Australia again, in my opinion, ever again. And that's not how it is, but it's kind of that. It's a no-go area, and I would like other nations to push that kind of agenda through their players. You know what? We can't let you do this. We want you to play Test cricket. Now, this is where, again, I want the ICC to come in and to give money to these West Indies, give money to South Africa, so they don't have to go along this line. Now, I know 48 hours ago, I named a certain amount of players that, I hit at the moment. You're probably right. It's not the players' fault, but what they've earned during IPL, it's a far amount of ridiculous worth of money they've earned. What the hell have you done to spend it with it all?
Australian contracts are worth millions, says Cam Crick. Other non-big three countries are nowhere near that. And he's right. England had this a few years ago. What you were saying, Lucas, they had during Kevin Peterson's time, he was saying, well, go and let me play IPL. I want to go and earn big bucks in the IPL. Because obviously at the time, Kevin Peterson was one of the marquee players. You could get a very big bid in an IPL auction and did do. And for a while, English cricket played hardball and said, no, you're going to play for England. We're not going to release you for the IPL. And ultimately, they're on the verge of a players' mutiny, and Peterson was going to spit his dummy out. I understand why, to be honest. I don't agree with everything KP says, but I think in that respect, you're kind of restraining trade a little bit if you're stopping people going off and doing what they want to do. But if you play that hardball game, the danger with Australia, you're Australian, you're talking about Australian cricketers, is that Pat Cummins, Mitchell Starc, David Warner, Travis Head, Steve Smith, etc., Marnus Labuschagne, turn around and say, well, stick your Australian cricket. If you're going to be like that, we're going to go off and play T20s and we're going to earn lots of money and you can find another person to represent your team.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the year. There was a similar situation what you just mentioned actually was pretty true. I think it was before the South African series in Australia where they got completely hammered. I forgot what year that was, James. I think 2016, 2017. Okay. Anyway, there was a huge pay dispute. Steve Smith was the captain back then. And it was pretty big in Australia, and I was very upset by that because Australia players were actually going to walk out. They were going to say, you know what, if you're not going to pay us, we're not going to play. And I had strong opinions on that as well. I said, well, if you're going to do that, if you're going to sell your baggy green, well, you can give that back and never play Test cricket again. Something along those lines, a bit stronger. But and again, this is why I said the ICC need to give these struggling nations money so they can push Test cricket. Now,
there's money in cricket. It's just all going to the same people.
Yeah, that's the problem, James. That you hit the nail on the head. It's going to the same place, and when it does go to the same place, they're not sharing. So maybe it's on the boards to maybe the ICC need to bring in a rule saying you need to get X amount of dollars into a format. Whatever it takes. I never watched the West Indies play with a powerhouse of the 80s. No, that was before my time.
Wonderful team.
But that's a crucial part of Test cricket, that era. A very crucial part. The dominance of West Indies, beating the mighty Australians, dominating the mighty Australians, led by Alan Border, the Chappells. And to see that nation just disappear into oblivion. They still play Test cricket, but to see it just disappear into oblivion and all the blood, sweat, and tears that these legends before that, Holder, Ambrose, Walsh, Lara, Gardner and Viv Richards. How can I forget Viv Richards? Put all their sweat, blood, and tears into that game and just completely go wasted. It's so sad to see, James. Very sad to see.
I remember talking to Desmond Haynes and Gordon Greenidge when I was in the Caribbean one year and had very similar chats, sort of saying, they need to involve the ex-players. They need to be. I mean, basically that team that came through the 80s, which you mentioned a lot of players from there, was an extraordinarily fantastic team. Great team to watch. It was obviously at the time quite hard to watch because they were murdering our teams and 5-0 and everything. But it turned really quickly because the Brian Lara, I remember talking to Brian Lara and said, you'd be brilliant at T20. Because he'd only, I think, if you look at Brian Lara's record, he played about 2 or 3 T20 matches in his career before he retired. You imagine what Brian Lara would have commanded at an IPL auction in his prime, and Viv Richards, many of them.
Oh yeah, Viv Richards, definitely Viv Richards. Yeah,
I mean, he'd have gone for a fortune. He'd have bankrupted the IPL because he'd gone for so much. But my favourite player ever to watch, by the way. But that turned very quickly because all of a sudden the Caribbean didn't have the money to pay the players for playing Test cricket as they thought they should be rewarded. So you got the likes of Chris Gale. There was a period of a few years where you could have named an 11 for West Indies that would have been very competitive globally to play Test cricket, but they were all playing IPL and playing franchise tournaments because they'd turned their back on the game, and they were looking after themselves. I don't blame any of those players for doing that because they were looking after themselves, their families, their bank balances. It's their career. They're trying to maximise their earnings, but it was, the West Indies Cricket Board just did not have the funds to compete. And Pakistan, I sort of think something the other day saying, I don't know how true it is, that a lot of the Pakistan players have not been paid for ages for playing for Pakistan. They've got the PSL, and the PSL's been big for Pakistan cricket. But we've obviously seen Shaheen. It might have been a dead rubber against Australia, but it's still a Test cap. How many of us watching this would chop our right arms off to get a Test cap for our countries? I mean, just to go back a step, how I say this quite a bit and often get torn down for it when I say, surely playing for your country is the pinnacle. If you're a young player coming through, surely you have dreams of playing for your country rather than playing for Mumbai Indians. Yeah, maybe you have dreams of playing for Mumbai Indians, but that you play for Mumbai Indians to then get the Test call up, like Suryakumar Yadav did. He kind of played for Mumbai Indians for a long time and then got his call up for the Indian side. But for me, a Test cap or an ODI cap or a T20I cap is more important than a cap in the domestic league. And however you might look at it, whether they're called franchises or not, IPL, South African, Caribbean Premier League, Pakistan Super League, the 100 is domestic cricket. It's not international cricket. You're playing against good players, obviously, but it's not the top end. It's not international.
Well, with all those South African players, wanting to play that league, just look at their young bowler Berger, who had a magnificent first Test matches. As I look now, just destroying the Indians in this match with his bowling. This is his second Test. This is his debut series. He won't be playing against New Zealand because he's going to play in the South African Premier League. That's a young player like that, and only your second Test match is already bogged down by money. That's the most distressing thing about it. I can accept a player that's 200 matches, 300 matches, that's fine. But a young player, James, a young player playing your debut series, and you can't play Test cricket against New Zealand because you want to play somewhere else for money. Let's
rephrase that. The South African Cricket Board wants him to play somewhere else for money.
Yeah, I think I think that's, like I said, for a young player like Berger, that's just pathetic, absolutely pathetic. He's first debut series, and they're already telling him where to play. They're already telling you can't play against New Zealand, you can't play Test cricket. I think that's an absolute disgrace, James.
Thank you very much to our sponsors at manscaped.com. Quote Badger on the manscaped.com website, and you'll get yourself 20% off, and you'll also get free shipping. We'll be back with more chat. We're going to talk about overrates. We're going to talk about all sorts of things that make Lucas explode.
Gentlemen, I want to show you my balls. Look at them, they're silky and smooth. Those are their attributes. I haven't given them names. But for some people, smooth isn't enough. They want smoother. They want flawless. They want transcendent. They want perfection. A surface that's completely without friction. That's why Manscaped created the Ultra Smooth package. For men who like their package ultra smooth. The exfoliator repairs, the clear gel protects, and the crop shaver perfects. Still going. The crop shaver has 3 precision blades as well as micro combo bar and extra wide lubrication strips, so your crown jewels won't fear getting nicked. So if you're the kind of guy who wants to be that little bit smoother, go to manscaped.com, and you could have a package as perfect as this.
And thank you again to manscaped.com for their continued support of the Cricket Badger podcast into 2024. Quote Badger and fill your boots. Some really good gear on that site. Anyway, back to our chat. We've been talking about all things that are harming Test cricket, or the things getting in the way of Test cricket being, well, certainly as big as me and Lucas want it to be in terms of the priorities. Is Test cricket dying? One of the things that I know is upsetting you and has upset me over the years as well is over rates in Test cricket. They seem to be getting slower and slower. I know DRS is not helped because obviously some of those reviews take ages, don't they? But get around the park, bowl the next over. It's not hard, is it?
This is one of the worst. We talk about, what can we do to bring people to watch Test cricket. Today, when Australia played Pakistan, there was 40 overs bowled in 2 sessions. That is absolutely pathetic. Now, you did bring up a point saying, well, what are the batsmen doing? What's going on? 30 to 40% of the time is a damn side screen. There was an incident today at the SCG where there was a little tear in the side screen. It took 15 minutes to repair. And it was right. It wasn't at the middle. It was at the right end of the side screen. It was just absolute farcical. Other percent of the time, it's captains, trying to set field placing every damn over. It's one of the worst things that annoy, apart from bad light, that annoy me with Test cricket is over rates. And it seems to me the ICC don't really care. Yeah, they put punishments in place, but for what? Just don't do that again. Slap on the wrist. That I think ever since bringing in rules or punishments, it hasn't even worked, James. They continue to do it, waste time. Now, you brought up a point saying, what if it's a batsman? Now, I've got a perfect solution here. Perfect solution. All right. If the bowlers are, and by the way, bowling 90 overs in 6 hours of play is not that hard, considering sometimes we go to 7 p.m. local time. So sometimes 7 hours of cricket. It is not that damn hard, with all due respect. But, however, perfect solution. If a batsman holds up time, I think there should be a 3 warning system. So, like, you can make up a signal, do that, look at your watch, and put a warning on batsman. Now, if the batsman gets 3 warnings, captain gets immediately suspended a game. Bowling side, if you can't bowl 90 overs in a game, automatically 1 game suspension. If you put that in play, James, trust me, over rates are going to go up really quickly.
It's not as simple as that, though, is it? It's not as simple as that, because if your shoelaces come undone, you've got to stop to tie them up. If you are, if you're injured, you've got to stop to get treatment. Yeah. There are certain things that stop play. And I mean, kind of, I don't like the term gamesmanship or whatever, but you do get teams when they're playing out for a draw, they slow it down. The batting side slow it down, and that's part of the game. It's part of the, it's a good part of the game if it's your team slowing it down. It's a bad part of the game if it's the opposition slowing it down. But it's happened forever in the game. So there are things that I mean, I think the umpires need to take more responsibility. I liked it in the Cricket World Cup recently, where a player that had just had a change of gloves, somebody ran on to bring him something else, and the umpire told him to well, not in these words, but F off, basically. You've only just been on, get yourself off. We have designated drinks breaks, and they had quite a lot of drinks breaks because it was so hot there. So you didn't need any more. And you don't need them. You don't need them in Test cricket either. There are designated drinks breaks. Have them when they're scheduled.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Someone gets struck somewhere. No, I'm going to leave out head because that's mandatory. But someone gets head on the finger, head on the thumb, then drinks come on the field. You're not there to give the player drinks. You're there to treat him. He doesn't need a 10-minute drinks break. The batsman at the other end that's uninjured doesn't need a 10-minute drinks break. The team, then the other opposition team, the fielding team brings in drinks, waiting for that batsman. That needs to stop. That can be clamped down by the umpires. There's so much that happens, too often. Now, with your point about injuries, that's fine. I'm more than happy to let that go with injuries and shoelaces, or maybe someone walks in front of the side screen, which is a common problem everywhere, especially in Australia. That's fine. That's let go. But I'm talking about the blatant time wasting that captains do, and that's not just Australian problem. Everybody does it to a certain extent. Everybody, every captain, every team.
Had a message from Tom here. Happy New Year to you, Tom. He says, and this is a good point that goes against you, really, Lucas, your idea. And like I say, I don't think it's as simple as you make out. If England's opponents think that by calling for regular glove changes or drinks to slow the over rate down means that they will play the next test without Ben Stokes, don't you think they'd contrive to do that and get the opposition punished? Imagine the Ashes series where England are playing and Ollie Pope's calling for fresh gloves every 5 seconds. The over rate's gone down. Pat Cummins has got no control over that. But Pat Cummins is the man to get suspended in the next test by your new rule.
No, my new rule is that when the batsman's playing, you give it a 3 warning system. So in that little example, if Ollie Robinson brought gloves onto the field after being at the crease for only 2 minutes, umpire goes up to Ollie Robinson, does this little watch warning number 1. I guarantee you, if Ben Stokes is sitting up there, he's saying, "What the hell are you doing? You're going to get me suspended." I guarantee that is a win-win situation. Opposition captains will tell their batsmen not to waste time, get on with the game, and we can bowl our 90 overs. So that's what I mean from that. So I think if you in place that, go.
Sorry, in ODIs, I kind of there was a time limit for bowling the overs in the ODI Cricket World Cup, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And there was only once it was enforced. But if you were behind the over rate, if you didn't kind of start to bowl your final over before the cut-off time, you lost so many fielders off, or you could only your kind of fielding restrictions were worse for the fielding side than they were for the batting side. You couldn't get as many men out on the fence, which obviously could potentially cost you runs in the final knockings of an ODI innings. Is there something that we could do in Test cricket that kind of maybe replicates that? If after an hour, if you've not bowled the requisite number of overs in that hour, you take a fielder off the park or something.
The reason I'm going to say no to that, the reason is in ODI cricket, when you lose a fielder, it can hurt you. If you lose a fielder in Test match cricket, where a batsman can just graft and graft and graft, it may not hurt you as much. So I don't think the effect would be as big as in white ball cricket as it would be in Test matches.
It would still hurt you, wouldn't it? I mean, if Joe Root edges through a vacant third slip, so you've had to take him off.
Well, but then you're net picking different batsmen. So you might have a Pujara type player who sees a gap but says, well, just because you've got a gap, I'm just going to go ahead and play my style. So I don't think it would hurt you as much as in the white ball game.
I don't think either of us come up with a perfect solution there, because it's not an easy thing to tackle. Going back to my black and white youth, they used to be bowling 18 overs an hour or 17 overs an hour in those days. Now they're struggling to bowl 11. So it's it really is something that needs to be looked at, but it needs to be looked at. Like I said, all of these things that we've talked about today to help Test cricket. Slow over rates don't help Test cricket. Not having your best teams out don't help Test cricket. These are things that they need to sit down, Lucas. ICC needs to get people around a table, representatives from all nations, sit them down and say, how do we, this is in your interest to make Test cricket thrive and be vibrant. How do we solve all these things?
Well, regardless of that, the punishment needs to be a lot better, bigger or better, or whatever you want to call it. Finding someone that's on a multi-million-dollar contract, 5% of their fee, really that's not going to inspire them to go quicker in the over rate, because it hasn't done in the past, because it keeps on happening. So regardless of what the punishment is or what the ICC need to do, they need to just make the punishment more.
I don't know who pays the fines, whether it is actually the players in reality, whether it's the board that jumps up the money. But if you're fined half of your match fee for a slow over rate,
Yeah.
I always feel sorry for the young lad that's making his Test debut that hasn't actually quite got as much money as the rest. He's had half of his match fee disappear out of it. He's actually looking at that 10 grand match fee thinking, oh, blimey, that's the most I've ever got. And it's all of a sudden it's 5 grand. Whereas Ben Stokes, it's pocket change.
Well, that's why I mentioned captains only. Now, I wouldn't. Now, as you know, South Africa are going to start a debut, a captain on debut. Now, I don't wish that upon him losing his 0.5% of his match fee.
That's a big day
you
for
got
him,
Tom.
isn't it? It's a massive day for him. I mean, just going kind of playing sort of not devil's advocate really, but actually kind of looking at that series. I will watch that series probably more than I would have done if the South African first team will be there, because I want to see some of these kind of B-listers, with all due respect, having their moment and seeing how they do, and watching that captain to see how he thrives or doesn't.
Well, I'll be watching it because it's Test cricket regardless. But to your point, that it does want to make me watch it even more. I have a feeling I know what's going to happen. I think it's just basically 3 points to New Zealand. But it'd be very interesting to see how South Africa go in that series, because I know New Zealand are going to make green tops.
On the basis of what we've seen today, Lucas, with South Africa's first team being out for 55, you wonder if the second team will do better.
Maybe that's not such a bad idea after all. And like I said, these players aren't scrubs. The team that South Africa are playing in, in New Zealand. Benningham's a fantastic county player, leading run scorer, one of the leading run scorers the last 12 months in the county. So they're no scrubs.
And he was playing before. He got his debut before the change as well, didn't he? So he was already in the team, really.
Yes, yeah. So they're not playing any scrubs. They're not getting a guy that's only averaging 40 in the domestic league and bringing him over. But I think it will be extremely one-sided. I think we might see. I don't think we'll see scores like that, like we just saw in India. But I think we'll see probably lower like scores from South Africa, especially on those pitches. Well, the bottom line is it's 3 points for New Zealand, isn't it? For 3 World Test Championship points, isn't it? So.
I actually feel sorry a little bit for South Africa because they've been pushed into a corner, and this has happened to them. It could have happened to any smaller nation. This, it could have happened to Pakistan when they were setting up the PSL. It could have happened to the Caribbean, West Indies when they were setting up the CPL. It's happened to South Africa because of a load of things have not quite worked out for them, and they've ended up with 2 things in the calendar at the same time, haven't they? But this is where, for me, just going back to where we started with this is where the ICC need to actually say, right, we need to recognise there's an issue here. We need to recognise there are only 365 days in the calendar. We need to recognise that we want to see Test cricket thrive, and we want to see white ball cricket thrive, and we want to see each and every country thrive. How do we actually pick this up and take this forward so that everybody can get what they want out of this game? Because at the moment, I think there's too many conflicts. There's too many. We see in England with the 100. There's the ones that want it. There's the ones that don't want it, and basically 2 tribes kind of going to war, as Frankie Goes to Hollywood would have said. But we want ultimately, we're all cricket fans. The cricketers are all cricketers that want to play the game and want to earn from it. We're all cricket fans that want to watch it and enjoy it, whatever shade of ball it is. We need to get a setup where over a cycle of cricket, whether that's 4 or 5 years, everybody gets out of the game what they want to get out of it.
Well, you mentioned windows and time. Well, over the last 12 months, the ICC have now brought back the Champions League, Champions Trophy. So that's even more time out the window, James, for a tournament that does not need to be anywhere. I know the Champions Tour was once part of white ball cricket outside the World Cup, back in the early 2000s and that, but it's it's an unnecessary thing where you don't need to do that with already time that's not available, and the remaining time you've crammed it in with an unnecessary tournament.
If I was,
So
if I was, if those months of the year where the Champions Trophy is going to be played are actually vacant, which I doubt very much because you could soon fill them up with other stuff. But I'd bring back the Champions League. We've got, if we're going to celebrate the fact that we've got all of these franchise tournaments around the world, get the champions of South Africa, get the champions of the PSL, get the champions of the CPL, get the champions of the Big Bash, the IPL, all together to actually play out to see who's the best club side in the world, kind of thing.
I think they actually did that one year, James. I remember
I went to it. It was really good.
Yeah, I think the Sydney Sixers won it one year, but then they wouldn't get the crowd, so I think it just died.
He got shunted to South Africa one year when India was having elections, I think, and that's when I went. But what that was as well. What I found really good about the Champions League was that Yorkshire went. That's why I went, and it meant that some of the players that played for Yorkshire, who were never going to play international cricket, were playing on a big stage. They were playing against the likes of MS Dhoni and some of the big IPL stars and stuff like that. So it gave them a moment, a chance to shine, kind of thing, really. And what was wrong with the Champions League was that again the big three ruled it, because India were guaranteed 3 teams in the main draw. Australia were guaranteed 2 teams in the main draw. I think England were guaranteed 2 participants, and then you got the likes of Pakistan and some of the other countries only had 1 participant, so it still wasn't fair.
See, speaking of Champions League, like they do in the football, I had a idea many years ago that the domestic 4-day competition should have a Champions League, but you're never gonna so let's say WA win it, or your Yorkshire win it, or whoever wins it in the Ranchi, all come together and play in tournament. Yeah. Well, I think it was an idea at one point, then it kind of just died down very quickly. But you won't see that because, as you've just mentioned, you've mentioned white ball again. So once again, this is where the problem with white ball. Once again, it's sacrificing red ball cricket to pull more white ball in. Now, do we want a red ball Champions League tournament? Probably not. Would it be interesting? Well, depends who you ask.
One final point before we finish today is that at the moment we've got 3 formats. We'll ignore the 100 and T10 for now. We've got three major formats. We've got Test cricket or first-class cricket, red ball. We've got white ball cricket or the longer form domestic white ball, and then we got T20. For me, I mean, I quite enjoyed the Cricket World Cup, I have to say, but I find that I am much more likely to give up a day of my life to watch a day's Test cricket than I am to watch an ODI. I think ODIs are long, and they take a lot of you have to commit a lot to that. I personally, I'd take out bilateral ODI series full stop. 50 over stuff. Just get rid. Maybe play once every 4 years, like the Football World Cup. Play a global 50 over tournament like we've just seen in India. But apart from that, take 50 overs out the calendar, and then you've got time. You've got a little bit of slack in the existing calendar. And rather than people at the ICC think, bing, that's a good idea, let's shoehorn in another IPL or something else to make more money. Actually give some Test series a bit of time to breathe. Let Afghanistan, Ireland, Netherlands, if they get on board, West Indies, whatever, play 3 Test series rather than just the 1 or 2 Test series, which are quite frankly unsatisfactory. What's beautiful about a Test series is, and that's why the Ashes is great, and why England against India coming up in this year is great, that you get a 5-day Test match. I kind of go back to what I've said this a lot, but to me, a Test match is like a feature film, an Oscar-winning movie. You get bad ones, you get good ones, but an Oscar-winning movie, the very best Test match, has that narrative going through 5 days where you get the best playing against the best, and you get a climax which is worth waiting for. As I say, you get some bad tests as well. An ODI is a little bit more like a kind of an hour-long TV program. A T20 is more like a TV advert. You get some really funny TV adverts, you get some really poor TV adverts, but they are quite quick, and you forget about them quite quickly. You asked me to kind of try and tell you the ins and outs of a T20 that I saw 2 years ago. I'd struggle. you asked me to tell you every ball of the 2005 Ashes series, I'll be able to talk you through every single test match. That is the difference. And the beauty of a long series, then, you've got these isolated test matches, which you have these narratives going through. And then when you get 3-match series, 4-match series, or a 5-match series, you get the narrative going through the series. You get Stuart Broad getting on top of David Warner. Can David Warner fight back? You get these little battles that go through over a period of a month rather than just over 5 days. That's why Test cricket is brilliant. You don't get that quite anywhere near as much in a T20 or a 100 or a T10 competition. And that's why Test cricket needs to be preserved, because it's got that ability to take you on a journey. Not just kind of like give you're going to watch a T10 for 2 hours, forget about it, move on with your life. A test series takes you on a journey.
Well, it's a bit like the Titanic, takes you on a journey.
Not that journey. No, we don't want that journey. I don't want to be sinking in an iceberg.
No, don't want. Good movie, by the way. If anyone's a movie fanatic, haven't seen that, very good movie. And number two, to your point, I don't want you to bring up the 2005 Ashes series, James. Because once again, I didn't go to school during those days, and I wish I did. Especially the second Test match where we fell 2 runs short.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is why Lucas is like he is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he watched too much Test cricket and not enough schoolwork. When the teacher told him to pay attention, he fell asleep. I don't recommend that. Well, if that's what you got to do, watch Test cricket, then I do recommend that. But in all seriousness, I think India, Australia, and England are always going to play their test series. And just on India and South Africa, why that's a 2-test series, I'll have absolutely no idea. And why the New Zealand and Australian test match in New Zealand, we haven't been to New Zealand since 2015, I think. That's only a 2-test series. That's an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. Why those 2-test series are only 2 tests, I'll never know. Like they're always going to play that.
The thing about a 5-test series is a batter could start out of form, and by the 3rd test can actually find some form and still have a very good series. If you're only playing a 2-test series, that batter never finds form and just has a dreadful 2 tests, doesn't he? You get kind of swings of kind of dominance. I mean, like we saw in the summer where England played Australia. Australia won the first 2. England bounced back. You get that potential for things to change during a series, which you don't give it the opportunity in a 2-test series.
And also with a 2-test series, the result of the first test kind of dictates what the series is going to be.
Yeah.
So like South Africa winning the first test, India can't win the series. I think that's completely garbage. The outcome of a series is decided by the first test. That's absolutely ridiculous. But that's again. That's an ICC problem. I've certainly tried my best to try to get their attention. That's fallen on deaf ears. I think you tried your best on that, James. That's fallen on deaf ears. So it seems to me that they're content living in their own little bubble and filling us with white ball cricket, which I said no problem with. But when it's sacrificing Test cricket, then that's when I have a problem. That's when I can't support white ball cricket at any format. Just on that World Cup, I didn't even bother watching the World Cup until Australia made the semi, because I was disinterested in it. I wasn't drawn to it by any stage. I thought outside of India matches, the crowd was very dismal. There were some matches where there was just an empty stand. I think that's pretty poor in a major sporting tournament where you have empty seats everywhere. You're
opening up a whole other discussion here, but I think that some of those stadia are so big. I mean, it's the biggest stadium. Was it the Ahmedabad one's got 130,000 capacity, so you could put 60,000 in there and it looks empty. So I think that can be an optical illusion at some of those, and the crowds did get better as the Cricket World Cup went on.
They got better, but when it wasn't India or Australia or England, the crowds are, for me, very small. Like I said, it could be an illusion, because I've seen one of their biggest stadium, Eden Gardens, completely packed in a day-night test match where they played Bangladesh. Who would have thought that? Full house against Bangladesh in a test match. And that was absolutely fantastic. I don't know if you ever saw that test match, James, but that was absolutely incredible. Just the atmosphere, how it was presented, how it was done, how it was hyped. I thought that was absolutely outstanding. But like I said, we're traditionalists, James. We prioritise on wet belt format. Other people like youngsters don't have the attention span to watch 6 hours of cricket a day, and that's fine. That's okay. But as long as I'm around, as long as people like you are around, James, we'll at least try our best to support Test cricket. And I think that's the most important thing at this point, where white ball is literally shoved in our face.
There you go. There's one way to finish this podcast: the white ball being shoved in your face. Anyway, Lucas, thank you very much for joining me today. I don't think we've actually changed anything there, but it's been a nice discussion to have, and trying to get kind of people just turning their attention and the spotlight on Test cricket, which of course England and Ben Stokes and Baz Ball are trying to save. So come on, England, as they travel to India to get beaten 5-0. We will no, hopefully not. Anyway,
I will review that one. Don't worry, I'll be there. I'll be watching that series. Don't you worry about that, James. I'll be watching that ball by ball. Trust me on that one.
I would love it if England won 5-0 themselves, but I really do fear for England and Baz Ball in conditions.
I have a confession, James. I have a confession. I hope England win. I hope England win that series. You know why, James? Because I want Australia to be the first team to break Baz Ball. I don't want it to be India. I want it to be Australia. You come to Australia in 2026, undefeated. Baz Ball never lost a series, and then we come and win 5-0. Oh, that'd be the dream. I would really love that.
Not going to happen. We're going to be beaten in India. I do fear for it. I hope Ben Stokes and his team have success there, but I do fear in India England are going to suffer. But then by the time they've learnt from those lessons, they'll go to Australia and absolutely rub your nose in the dirt, Lucas. Happy New Year to you.
Wait for the green tops. We got green tops waiting with Scott Boland with Joe Root's name all over that. Don't you worry about that, James. 5 luxury green tops.
Scott Boland will be 86 by then. Anyway, we will finish today's podcast. We've just gone over the hour mark. Thank you, everybody, for watching as we've been rambling on live, and thanks for tuning in later as well on the audio podcast on any Cricket Badger podcast platform. Just put Cricket Badger podcast into Google. You'll find it somewhere and be able to listen along later as well. Subscribe to it too, so you can always get them straight into your phone or your laptop and what have you as we go through 2004. Some big plans for 2004, so there'll be plenty more Cricket Badger podcasts to come. Thanks to Gaurav. Good happy New Year to him as well. Tune into Gaurav Ayan's YouTube channel too, and that's where you can see this on as well. Lucas, thank you again. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm going to mute Lucas now and get rid of him, and then we will put on the overlay to finish the show, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers all.